Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
Well, there's Purple Daily. There's the Before I Die show. There's Vent Line. There's Purple Access, which you have hit upon right now. Zolgad, Declan Goff, as always, executive producing. Chip Scoggins from the Star Tribune joining me, as he does once a week. All right, Chip, let's start here. Did you see, and if so, were you as surprised as I was to see that Patrick Peterson on his All Things Covered podcast went out of his way to say how surprised he was Ed Donatell was fired and how he loved the defense and how he wants them to stick with an aggressive 3-4. Okay, some of these things don't add up. First of all, they played a 3-4, but I didn't think it was aggressive. And second of all, why would anybody be surprised Ed Donatell got fired after the season that defense put together?
Yeah, and it's Pat P is normally not one that has to sell something. You know, I mean, we saw it with Kyler Murray that he normally speaks his mind, and he does that with us. And so I'm sure he liked probably Ed Donatell as a person, and I'm sure he probably liked the scheme and all that. I find it hard to believe that he was surprised. I don't think anybody was surprised. This is what I'm curious about, and why I think O'Connell knew he was going to fire Donatell when we had our season-ending presser. Just didn't want to address it at that time. They wanted to talk about the team and the culture and all that, and then put out the press release a day later. But I'm curious. I assume he's married to the 3-4. That was a big part of, he talked about the Fangio system, and that's what he likes. That's what's hard to go against, is what I think he said when he brought in Donatell. So I assume that hasn't changed. He just felt like he had the wrong guy running it, Judd. But I'm not sure the personnel you have fit it yet. And so how long does that transition take to where you get the right personnel to run that scheme?
I don't know. And this is going to sound weird because clearly Kevin O'Connell is a good offensive coach. But, Chip, it's funny. In all of sports, I think the biggest discrepancy is head coaches who always now, obviously come from one side of the football, unless they're a special teams guy, and those guys are rare. Harbaugh in Baltimore is one, but Kevin O'Connell, good offensive coach, but he's the latest guy who you watch the other side of the ball play. And as much as these guys try to break down that side of the ball to beat it, Zimmer with offense, O'Connell with defense, it is startling sometimes how oblivious they can be to what needs to be done there. Cause you're exactly right. So how did Kevin O'Connell sit down and watch film of Kendricks and say, 3-4, baby, Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't care. He didn't care as much. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he said, this is a scheme that's going to work long-term. And if we have some short-term pain because the pieces don't match, well, then we'll fix that through free agency, drafting, et cetera, et cetera. That way we're not doing one thing one year, another thing the next year. And you'll just live with, some clunkiness early on. He probably didn't think they'd be one of the worst defenses in pro football when you're doing that.
Yeah.
But I can understand when you're coming in, saying, I just don't want to be changing schemes every other year. I mean, yes, we could run this year because the personnel that we have that are under contract don't necessarily line up with the 3-4. But I don't want to run a 4-3 this year and then a 3-4 next year. We'll solve the personnel thing as we go along. Let's implement the scheme that we have. So I guess I don't. That doesn't surprise me. I think winning covered up or allowed O'Connell not to be as forceful as he probably wanted to be. With, hey, this thing's a mess. You need to be more aggressive. You need to be less predictable. We didn't hear that until they had the one real bad loss. And so I think in hindsight, maybe I'm not saying he didn't address those things with Donatell privately, but he wasn't forceful publicly until it felt like they were in a free fall defensively.
Yeah, I think the most important thing too, Chipper, and you used the word as well, is this aggressiveness. I'll never understand why defenses go down not swinging, and like it seemed like the
Yeah.
Vikings did. Like there was like what was the aggressive, and Pat Pete talked about this, and he basically said our defense was solid enough as long as the front four or the front three, but as long as the
Yeah.
front got pressure. And then when we didn't, which was basically the second half of the season, and
Yeah.
keep in mind too, Zadarius Smith got hurt. But the second half when we didn't get pressure, but it's like, okay, but it's your job at that point in time to dial up
Change.
more pressure. Not just say,
Yeah,
well, now, Kevin, now it's not working, but this isn't my fault. That's not how this works.
Well, that's the thing, Judd. You had a coordinator who has been doing this for a long time, was stuck in his ways. We don't like to blitz. This is how we like to do it. It's been successful. It can be successful. But when you're having a player of Daniil Hunter's caliber and pedigree, and he's ineffective for the first half of the season, something's wrong. And, it was like week 11 where he told us he's still adjusting, or week 12. It's like, really? Like, takes this long? So, yeah, I just think he was slow to adjust and maybe didn't adjust at all, in terms of really being consistent with being aggressive, not only just bringing pressure, but allowing his corners to be aggressive and press and play man. It's just sitting back in that shell and just
Zone.
death by a 1,000 paper cuts is what it was. And the irony of that was they were still giving up big plays. His whole thing was, let's not give up big plays, but they gave up probably more big plays than any to get into football. So it's like it's still not taking away what you're hoping to take away. So that's why I would love to be a fly on the wall for these interviews with the defensive coordinators to hear like what the message is from O'Connell, what he wants, what's his vision. And I guarantee it's pressure, be more aggressive, less predictable. We can't just sit back and play the way we did this year.
So at this point in time, I think in the past 4 days, they have talked to what appear to be, unless there's a candidate we don't know about, the 4 finalists that includes Mike Pettin, who was sort of O'Connell's bench coach, but has head coaching experience, and more importantly, has been a DC. Do any of the names intrigue you thus far?
Brian Flores. Yep. I mean, he would be my guy. He's obviously up for a head coaching job, so that'll probably dictate that. But what he did at Miami, and did I read this right, Judd? Did he play man more than any team? I think that's kind of his calling card. Now, do they have the personnel cornerback?
Right, because Pat P,
Again,
if he plays man, is going to get exposed.
Again, you might run into the personnel thing not lining up, but I agree with you. I'd rather go down swinging. I'd rather go down being aggressive. I mean, they're not going to be able to solve the personnel thing in one offseason. They're just not. And so I think I do get the sense that Kwesi and him are taking a long view on this after listening to that, that press conference. I mean, they know that this roster has to get younger and faster, and a lot of change has to happen. And you just don't do that in one off season. So, I mean, you're going to see a step backwards record wise. I mean, they're not going to win 13 games, I don't think, when you're trying to rebuild a defense, and you're not going to win all those close games again next year. So, but Flores, to me, I just like the aggressiveness that he, that his reputation is and comes with.
How much do you think too that it's going to be a balancing act, Chipper? Because they won 13 games. We know that the Wolves always want to be competitive, right or wrong, and we could certainly debate that is wrong sometimes, because it's just like basically putting lipstick on a pig until the playoffs. But how much of this do you think is going to be sort of a difficult balancing act? Because you got a veteran quarterback, your offense is pretty damn good, and yet, to your point, you're not wrong, the defense needs retooling. So like how tough do you think it's going to, because like you can't say now that you're going to do what the Bears did, which is, okay, we're just going to tear it down. You're too good offensively. You're going to win some games because of your offense, or you should.
Well, it's that thing. I was thinking about this the other day where, at some point they're going to have the exit strategy with Cousins. And ideally, you would bottom out and get a top 10 pick. You would be in you get your Joe Burrow or Josh Allen and be in that. I I just don't see them being able to do that with the talent they have on offense. I mean, I just um and some key guys on defense, but particularly on offense, I just don't see him being so bad that you're gonna can you know trade things and move up, try to do that. You can do that, but it's sort of like that the Wild were, right, where they were stuck in mediocrity all those years. That bottom out and get that top 5 pick. Well, the owner doesn't want to bottom out, right? And you got too much talent to bottom out, and so you're sort of stuck. But that was the thing with Zimmer's tenure too. Is like good enough to be competitive, not good enough to be realistically a contender in the playoffs. So I don't. How do you break that cycle? I don't know.
That's been the story of the Vikings, it feels like, more often than not.
Yeah.
And like the Wolves haven't changed that one bit because they always want to be competitive. Like the 13 wins, I'm sure to them was, oh, we made the right hires. It's been great. And I think the question comes back to, okay, what did you get for that? But like this is tough because your offense is it's certainly not perfect.
Top 10.
But it was damn
top
good.
10 offense. Yeah, it's a top 10 offense.
And like so your defense was hemorrhaging yards, and I'm curious what they're going to do because they're on such different paths, and the defense eventually could get good, but it's going to take some time, to what you're saying.
Well, that's it. I mean, as they're constituted, they're going to be a top 10 offense next year. I mean, they just will be. And
it should be better, yeah.
And so
take a step
is the defense going to be as bad as they were this year? Even if they are, you still. I don't think you can't count on winning 11 one-score games, but you're not going to win 4 games with that offense. You're not going to win, so that's, that to me is going to be the interesting dilemma for Kwesi is, yes, you can find your franchise quarterback picking 22nd, 23rd. You can. But if you want the guy you want, you're going to have to be in the top 10 probably, right?
Yes. Which means you might have to try to trade up for that guy. And we don't even know now. I think we can throw out theories, but no idea what the exit plan on Kirk is. I think they're going to sign him. If you put gun to the head right now, I think they're going to sign him to an extension in March for another year and take him through
2 years.
24. Yes. Yeah. And then have 2 years.
That way you can draft your quarterback in 24.
Yep.
But again, Judd, you want to be in that top 10. So how are you going to get there?
Do you trade to get there? I mean, you can trade to get there. The Bears did to get Justin Fields.
I don't think record-wise is going to do it.
I
just don't think they're going to be one of the 10 worst teams. I just don't see that.
But what I'm saying is you can, if you're not, let's say you're picking, 16th or 17th, you can make a trade. I mean, the Chiefs went to what to get Mahomes?
Yeah, I don't know what he was.
And it cost him a lot, but damn well worth it. Justin Fields might be worth it from Chicago.
Yeah, you sacrifice some future pick. I mean, absolutely. If you feel like if you're committed and have that much conviction in a guy, and you said this is going to be our quarterback for 10 years, you do it. And so I agree with you, Joe, because I don't think they want a lame duck year without knowing what the heck they're going to do after that. So it would not surprise me if they do lock in at 2 more years, because that would take Kirk to 36, right? He turns 35 in August.
Yes.
So he'll play out this year at 35, and then which, the way he keeps himself in shape and all that, that's not outlandish. And then you draft in 24, have him to have a redshirt year, and then there's your extra. I think that's the most likely scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think you're going to have to, because I just don't see this team really, really bottoming out. I think you're going to have to commit to a big package of picks and all that and move up to the top 10.
And one thing I would love to know too is, as the decision is made on this topic by the Vikings, what did that, if anything, and it had to influence a little bit, what did that last play offensively of the Giants game do? because O'Connell and Kirk had come so far,
Yeah, I
and
know.
you got to basically what they like to call nut cutting time, right? Like, this is it. You
Yeah.
know what? We've come this far. Let's continue. And we could talk about the pressure. We can make excuses, but the fact is, you needed 8 yards and threw a
And
check
threw
down.
three. Yeah, he threw
So
two.
I'd love
Yeah.
to know what O'Connell thinks now, because there's no way that doesn't have some type of impact on his thought process.
Yeah, I mean, but we know that he's a huge admirer of Cousins, and I don't think it's just a public thing. I mean, I think he genuinely believes in him. I'm sure he had a really like after all we did this year, really that's the play. Um, but I'm sure they're also saying, okay, what's the alternative? Like, you know, I don't think they would be saying anyways if he, you know, threw it 20 yards and completed it, and they, win and go get killed by San Francisco. I don't think they would be saying, let's do him to a 5-year deal here. I think they knew all along that, this is going to be a short shelf life. Let's try to maximize it while we can. But at some point here, pretty fairly quickly, we're going to have to, uh, move on. We're going to have to pivot and find a new guy. So I'm sure it probably frustrated O'Connell, but in big picture thing, I'm not sure it probably altered their outlook on how they're going to approach the future any differently.
So if it's not the draft, what about this? There's reports, and I don't know exactly what the price tag would be, but there's reports from San Francisco that, Purdy is almost certainly going to be the guy, which
Yeah,
means Trey Lance sits. And there are reports that the 49ers at least might entertain, or that there might be talks about trading Trey Lance if that's the case, because his contract is ticking and it makes no sense to have him
yeah,
on the bench. Would you entertain the thought process if O'Connell signs off and says, you know what, I saw him 2 days in
yeah.
practice, I've seen him on film, I like him, of trying to make him your QB of the future? I believe he'd be going into year 3 of his contract
3. Yeah, because
next
this is
season.
3.
So he's
Yeah, I
still
mean,
on that contract.
and I'm guessing O'Connell probably studied him pretty thoroughly in the draft process when he was in LA
Yeah.
and saw him. So if he came to me and said, you know what, love him, absolutely love him, he's our guy, then you do. I think you explore and see what it would cost. I have no idea what the price tag would be, what they would be asking for. But if there's any like, let's wait and see what is available in 24, because then, I mean, the one thing about that is, Judd, the whole idea is to get a guy on the rookie contract, right? Well,
Right.
you've punted on 2 years, and so you'd be pretty close to having to make it a big decision on massive contract, and so you don't give yourself a whole lot of time to be proven right. you know,
Yeah.
you better be 100% sure he is the guy if you're going into year 3 of his rookie deal. So I would be. I don't know how much O'Connell would be in favor of that versus, it'd be nice to take a guy in 24, have him sit for 1 year, and then really, have him be ready to hit the ground in year 2.
Hey, Chipper, as you watch the games in the divisional round, what basically hit you as far as where the Vikings need to go to get there? Because it's just those games were three of the 4 games. The Giants game was not fun, but 3 of the 4 games were entertaining to watch. And you saw some pretty good football played. What uh what basically hit you as being areas that the Vikings need to really, really upgrade to get to where those teams are?
Can you get Joe Burrow
Well,
and
that's what you're
Patrick
trying to
Mahomes?
do, right?
And can you get
I
Joe
think,
Burrow and Patrick Mahomes? I mean, Joe Burrow is just goodness gracious. I think he's number 2 right now. I still think Mahomes is 1. I think Burrow's 2. I'd put him ahead of Josh Allen right
well, I
now.
agree completely.
Defense. I mean, Judd, that's the thing. Your point earlier, talk about coaches and not being having the clearest idea of the other thing. But I mean, when you watch the 49ers and the Shanahan offense, and then that remarkable defense goes out there, I think forget even the rookie quarterback. I mean, to me they're the most complete team. I love to watch that team play, but defense, I mean, their defense, Eagles defense. I thought Cincinnati was incredibly physical and beat up
Yes.
the Buffalo Bills. I thought Dallas's defense, hung in there. I mean, this defense and it's the speed on defense and the aggressiveness. Watch the way the 49ers fly around and how physical they are and can run. That to me is like when you watch that and then you watch the Vikings, like, man, they got a long way to go.
So the hopeful thing about that, because I agree completely. I thought the first thing that stood out across the board from the defenses that we watched last weekend was just the speed. The second
Yeah.
thing was the physical. Like the Vikings, you know what? Not everybody, but the Vikings as a team since about 2020 have been sort of soft. Like they're just like when you watch San Francisco, they literally want to kick your ass, which is
Yeah.
awesome to watch. But the speed stuck out to me, and here's where I do find fault with coaching. Okay, and I told Phil and Dex this week as well. But how on earth, if you're O'Connell or Donatel, how do you watch in the Giants playoff game against the Vikings, Jordan Hicks, and before Asamoah got hurt, suffered the concussion? How do you not say we got to play this kid? Like,
Yeah.
how did you not get his season
Well,
high in snaps came against the Giants on Christmas Eve, Chipper? It was 27.
and Jed, I was there late in the season where O'Connell's like he's excited to see Asamoah and Metellus play more and get more snaps. It's like hint, hint, hint. It's like I want to see these guys on the field, and it just didn't materialize outside the other game. And I was talking to Seifert about this during season. It's like we don't know a lot about him, but he stands out because he's fast. He's like the one guy that can run on that defense. And yes, that's why I think people are hopeful. It's like just because he can run, and that's how the game is. And O'Connell addressed it in his year ender where he said it's like so much of this game is space anymore, and it's spreading you out. And Judd, we were there the 2 days or 3 days when the Niners were in here and they had the joint practices.
Yep.
I mean, you watched them. The one thing that jumped out to me was they were incredibly big. Like the whole team, like everybody was huge, and it just felt like they were in a different weight class than what the Vikings were. And that was just across the board. Just watching them practice, watching them run. I mean, it's just personnel. I mean, they that's where you felt like, man, the Vikings really, really have to turn the roster over and upgrade their talent. And it goes back to I did that column last week where what were the number of draft picks on defense that you had from the time of the Trey Waynes, Daniil Hunter, Eric Kendricks draft until now. I mean, they have swung and missed so many times on these guys, and either swung and missed on them or haven't developed them.
Right.
It's either or.
Yes. And that's what really hit me, Chipper, was they haven't developed them. And like you watch, Kansas City is playing a 7th round pick at running back. You know why? Because those guys can step in and play. And you look at the Vikings draft and the amount of players who they were just like, well, we can't play him. We're not going to play him. Like, I don't think that it's across the board excusable, but it sounds convincing to have Lewis Seen show up at training camp. Okay. He's your 1st round pick and say Cam Bynum is just clearly in front. It's your job to get Lewis Seen up to speed to play him. This is 2023. This ain't 1985. You're not Parcells, like you need your draft class. You need to maximize that thing. And I get that some guys got hurt and Seen eventually did too. But again, he wasn't hurt in training camp and they never even, and they said, well, he's not prepared to play yet. He can't play yet. Well, my comeback is, okay, get him prepared to play and at least have a package in which he can help you because, again, he's young and he's fast enough. And when I watched your defense, it looked like a bunch of guys our age playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's that mentality is like, just because you're a 1st round pick, we're not going to, guarantee you're not walking in day one starter. It's like, you took him in the 1st round because he's a special talent.
Correct.
Like, get that guy on the field, find a way that you can get him on the field. And yeah, he was basically a special teams guy before he got hurt. So just the lack of productivity from these draft classes that they've had. it's forced them to rely on older veterans who are on the backside of their career. And it's just that's why you see a slow defense out there. And that has to change. I mean, Kwesi has to be very, very good at drafting right now. He just does. I mean, they cannot have any more empty drafts where you have guys that either don't contribute or you have to sit because you don't think they're good enough. I mean, they need to get young talent on this roster
And
quickly.
develop
it. And yeah.
Trevor, great stuff. We will talk to you soon, man. Be good.
All right, bros.
Take care.